put on this computer. Okay, let's begin. Okay, good afternoon. We are for the economics as a human science. We are going to start with the definition of economics as usual. Economics is the allocation of scarce resources. It's the study of the allocation of scarce resources among alternative uses. It is based upon the notion of scarcity. Resources are scarce, so we gotta make choices, and these choices are to be determined by our preferences, of course, and the availability of resources that are in our possession, right? If a country, you are all famous, the idea of the famous influence or opportunity cost notion. And this notion says that if you have two or more than two options, we gotta choose the best one. The best meaning rational or, my God. The formal definition is the most rational way or with minimum cost, maximum benefits, right? Economics is about choice. This choice must be made in the best way, in the most rational way, and it must be about achieving the best outcome, whatever it is, with the least or minimum cost. If we want to, for example, kill as much as people we want, why? I don't know. This could be our own objective, right? I may be a mad person, and even worse than that, I may be the dictator of a country. So I want to kill as many people as I want. Doesn't matter who. So that is my objective. So what am I supposed to do in this case? I have to use the resources at my disposal, right? What are they? Military force, maybe, or some other destructive weapons, such as the nuclear weapons, etc. So my problem is very simple, right? To choose the best alternative. This is what economics is about, is it? Well, yes and no. It is not, because economics is about human, we usually say, but the formal definition of economics that is based upon this, the logic of choice, may lead us to some absurd conclusions in economics. Sometimes it is said that, for example, there's no difference between a saint and a killer, between, for example, Sister Teresa, a saint, a Catholic church, and Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper's utility function or objective function is very simple, right? To kill as much young maiden as he can. We are supposed, actually. On the other hand, Sister Teresa wants to help as many people as she can, healing the wounded, helping the poor, etc., etc. So there's no difference in principle between these two persons in terms of their objective function or utility function. Well, that is not quite true, but one is concerned with killing people, the other is with helping people. Of course, there's an important ethical and humane differences between them, but as a choice of logic, the reasoning is almost the same, right? The problem is to maximize the utility function with minimum effort, minimum cost, whatever they are. So that's what economics is about. Well, this definition actually starts in the late 19th century. And until the late 19th century, people talked about economics throughout the ages, since the beginning of the Greek society, ancient Greek society, of course, since the invention of philosophy. Philosophy, as you know, is an invention of the Greeks. And it's basically philosophia, right? The love of wisdom, it means more or less. You know, we love thinking about thinking itself, so to speak. So we'd like to think not simply about practical purposes, but also about thinking itself, right? The problems of existence, for example, existence of the world, existence of ourselves, existence of our own mind, etc., are all problems of philosophy, right? It's very difficult, actually, problems. It's not easy to solve them. Anyway, so economics is born as a sub-branch, so to speak, of philosophy. And this very name, economics, was invented by, let me share this guy, Xenophon here. He lived in the 5th to 4th century, I guess, BC, or BCE, we should say, before Common Era, not before Christ. So this guy was actually a general, army general, a military commander. And among his books, are famous Oikos Nomos, Oikonomia, which was translated into Turkish as well. And also this 10,000 Anabasis. Anabasis is a very interesting book. This book was also translated into Turkish, and I would recommend you to read it. You know, it's very easy to read, and also it's very exciting to read it because it's about some military expedition starting in Greece, actually, but here throughout Anatolia. This book, as what is this? Can I write it? Of course, Xenophon is the name of the guy. And oikonomia, it is a compound word, actually. It's from oikos and nomos. Oikonomia. I'm going to talk about this in a later. And the latter book is called Anabasis, or the return of the 10,000s. This is really an interesting book, the latter book. The return of the 10,000. It starts from here, Pergamon, and it goes all the way. No, I'm sorry, that was wrong. It started in Ephesus, in Anatolia, of course. And this was an army of like 13,000 people, soldiers and military commanders, etc. And Xenophon was one of them. Xenophon was born and raised in Athens, you know, the Athenians, the state. But unfortunately, during the war between Athens and Sparta, he sided with Sparta and he was expelled from Athens after the war. And he became a Spartan citizen. Later, of course, things changed, political arrangements. He returned to his home country, etc. But he wrote some interesting book. He was a student of Socrates with Plato, actually. But he was not as bright as Plato, of course. He's a military commander, basically. He was a very good cavalry officer, they say. And also he's distinguished with his military commanding ability. He was no soldier by trade, but you know, he became a soldier within this expedition of the 10,000. The aim of this expedition was to dethrone the Persian king by his brother, Kiros. This Kiros guy collected this huge army and wanted to go to, oops, sorry, are you still seeing this? Okay, let me see. Yep, this is better. To go to Babylonia here and replace the king with himself with this huge army. They go all the way from Ephesus to Babylonia. Unfortunately, they were beaten. The Kiros guy was killed by the Persian forces. And of course, some of the military commanders of the 10,000s were actually betrayed the rest of the army, and they wanted to go back, and they followed this road from the eastern Anatolia to here. What was this Black Sea region, and then finally they ended up in Pergamum. So this is a very interesting journey, but of course, let me say, okay. So, but for us, of course, the most important aspect of Xenophon is his invention of oikonomia, economics. In the 3rd century BCE. So since the 3rd century BCE, we have these ideas, books about oikonomia, economics. Maybe I can see, this technology is killing me, right? Okay, we gotta start from the beginning. This is the beginning of everything in terms of intellectual history, of course. We start with the Greek philosophy and science. Socrates was an important philosopher. He did not invent philosophy. Actually, there were some other philosophers, Ionian philosophers to be exact, who actually invented philosophy. This Ionia is the part of Turkey, right? Eastern Anatolia. Still, so especially there are some important philosophers at that region, and since the beginning of the 5th century BCE. But the Western philosophy in general can be said to be invented by or established by Plato. And Socrates was the teacher, so to speak, of Plato's. And usually Socrates did not write so much, actually. What he says is usually told us through Plato. So basically, Plato is the most important philosopher in terms of the establishment of the Greek philosophy. And of course, we have this Xenophon guy, and 440 and 355 BCE. And Plato, of course, and Aristotle, Plato's pupil, and Zeno. This is another interesting person, but we are not going to talk about him. And Ptolemy. Ptolemy is one of the most important scientists that actually establish a model for the universe. The Earth is at the center, all other planets and the sun itself rotates around the sun. This kind of cosmology was developed by Ptolemy. Actually, it's based upon the Aristotelian understanding of cosmology. Cosmology means views about cosmos, right? Anyway, and then we have fall of Rome, feudalism, Roman philosophy here. Roman people are not good at philosophy, actually. The most important philosophy they developed was Stoicism. It was invented by the Greek, actually, but one of the most important Stoic philosopher was Marcus Aurelius, also a Roman emperor, right? And here we have this Diocletian, Constantine the Great, Constantinople, right? And Justinian, one of the greatest Roman or Byzantine emperors. Anyway, so we have this, well, this is a complicated history, the complicated history of the Western thought. So economics started somewhere here, right? And here is a more adequate list of the books that were published since the 18th century. The first one is Plato, The Republic, and and Xenophon, The Ways and Means to Increase the Revenues of Athens, and with the oikos nomos, of course, he has some bunch of books actually. After retired, he wrote books. And Aristotle Politics, 300 BCE, and during the Middle Ages, Thomas of Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas was an important figure who actually applied Aristotelian ontology and cosmology to Christian Catholic thought, and he was one of the most important figures of the Catholic Church. And also there are other guys here, or something like that. And this particular age is starting with the 17th century, is a transformation of the world, starting in the Western part of the world, especially. And this age is known as Mercantilism, basically. And there are some important guys here, like Thomas Mann, Josiah Chad, William Petty, Dudley North, Nicholas Barbon, etc. And in the 18th century, we have this David Hume guy, and who's a philosopher, one of the most important modern philosophers, if not the most. And Cantillon, an Irish guy who lived and died in France. So he wrote in French. And this is also an economist, an important economist, and James Stewart, who actually, by the way, coined, not coined, I'm sorry, one of the most important economists that actually developed political economy. Anyway, okay, again, some important publication dates. We have this Francois Quesnay, who is the founder of economic analysis, so to speak, a physiocrat, and of course, Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a contemporary of Francois Quesnay, and he was influenced by Quesnay himself. But Adam Smith, he was a moral philosopher. He taught moral philosophy, and one of the most important books written by Adam Smith was this Theory of Moral Sentiments, 1759. And of course, our book, most important book in terms of the foundation of economics in general, was Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. And since Adam Smith, we have the classical period, starting with Adam Smith. Then there's Malthus, who's famous with his ideas about population growth. And Jean-Baptiste Say, we still use some of his ideas, such as Say's law, right? Supply creates its own demand. And David Ricardo, one of the most important classical economists, political economists. And there's William Nassau Sr. and John Stuart Mill. And okay, so mercantilism, mercantile capitalism, it is actually, this is the basis of the famous golden triangle. Took this from Wikipedia again. This shows actually the trade routes between the Europe, Africa, and Americas, basically. This is very interesting. A ship starts its journey from England, Liverpool, London, whatever, and goes to Africa, collects slaves, right, basically. And in return, they pay textiles, rum, and manufactures goods to Africa. This slave trade in many places was organized actually by the kings or chieftains, for example, of the local people, basically. Some of his people were sent as slaves. In return, they got some returns, right? Basically, gold or manufactured goods, etc., etc. These slaves are brought to Americas, to the plantations of sugar canes, for example. They produce sugar and also rum, and also tobacco, right? And cotton. Cotton plantations are also important. So sugar, tobacco, and cotton to Europe. So this is a very profitable trade. Even one journey is enough for a merchant to become very rich. Of course, it's not safe, right? And there are also, especially towards the end of the mercantilist period, these pirates became important. The beginning of the 18th century was sometimes called as the golden age of the piracy. Remember that Caribbean pirates thing, the movies. So this is that period, but still it's very profitable. And also many European countries, especially England and Netherlands and Spain, were at constant struggle within the Atlantic. You are going to take economic history class next year, I guess. But, this particular period is very important for capitalism to grow, basically. And this is sometimes called as primitive accumulation period, or sometimes it's also called the first globalization of capitalism, basically. This period starts with the geographic discoveries, 1492, the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. And 15th century and 16th century were witnessed the struggle between Spain and Portugal. Portugal was a small state, but they were very good in sailing, interestingly. And the world itself was divided by the Spanish and the Portuguese. The right of the Cape of Good Hope, is it? The end, the tip point of the African continent was belonging to Portuguese. The western part of the world was belonging to the Spanish by some papal decree declared by the Pope himself, basically. But after the 16th century, England became an important force, and also Netherlands became a free country. Before they were dependent to Spain, so they become free, and they established the republic, and they were also good at trade. So basically, this period is a very interesting period. It is distinguished by expansion in terms of the trade, the surplus from the trade and riches, etc. So this is the starting point of Europe's in general becoming richer than the rest of the world, and it is based upon trade. Well, by trade, of course, we are talking about these kind of things, right? Slave trade, sugar, tobacco, and so also colonialism, destruction of local villages, local people, local organizations, etc., etc. This is later to be called as imperialism, basically. This is a very interesting example, by John Maynard Keynes. Remember Keynes, macroeconomist? And he says, for example, there's a passage from his book, Essays in Persuasion, also an interesting book. I would recommend you to read it. The beginnings of British foreign investment to the treasure, which Admiral Drake, Francis Drake, was actually a pirate, basically, and he became important during the British and Spanish War. And Drake was the commander of the British Navy at that time. They had beaten the Spanish Armada. So basically in 1580, so in that year, he returned to England, bringing him with the produce spoils of the Golden Hind. And, Queen Elizabeth I, of course, was a considerable shareholder in the syndicate which had financed the expedition. This expedition is, by the way, to the Americas, basically, Northern and Southern Americas. Queen Elizabeth invested some money to his expedition. Some people also say that there are some deeper relationships between Elizabeth and Francis Drake, but it's not our problem. Out of her share, she paid off the whole of England's foreign debt, balanced her budget, and found herself with about £40,000 in hand. This is a very profitable trade, some almost more than 4,000% was the profit rate of the whole expedition. You can easily imagine what kind of expedition it is. It's basically looting. This she invested in the Levant Company, which prospered. Levant Company is the company that organized the trade with the Levant. Levant means Eastern Mediterranean, including the Ottoman Empire. So there have been two important companies like that. One was this Levant Company. The other was the East Indian Company. The East Indian Company was about the East Indies, the rest of the world. And in that famous movie, remember again, the Caribbean Pirates, the Pirates of Caribbean, yes. The company is the East Indian Company. It's more like a government organization, actually, government and private partnership it is based on. So they conducted all these colonialization process and also the trade with the Far East, basically. A similar company was founded in the Netherlands, of course, also the East Indian Company of the Dutch. And this was a very big company in the 17th century that its worth is more than $8 trillion in today's calculation in terms of dollars. $8 trillion. So, but in the end, of course, they had to come to have a clash with the British. They were beaten. Again, the Britain or the England became the most important force in the Seven Seas. So this is a period in which capital accumulation starts and advances at a very fast rate. So basically here, Keynes's calculation is here. So it's interesting that for every £1 which Drake brought home in 1580 has now become £100. Such is the power of compound interest. Of course, he talks about the importance of compound interest, but the story is very interesting, right? So this is, this is the classical period, starts with Adam Smith, etc. You are going to see them. And this guy, Francois Quesnay, was the founder of physiocracy. He was the advisor of King Louis the 16th, I guess. He was a medical doctor, interestingly, but he developed what he calls the tableau economic table. An economic table is the first example of today's national income accounts, basically. It's something like this. Yeah, there are three sectors in the economy: agriculture, farmers, artisans, you can call this industry, and proprietors, landlords, aristocrats, basically. And this table shows the interactions, economic exchanges among these three sectors. Each sector's output can be the inputs of other sector or sectors. So these complicated relations among the sectors of the economy were first imagined by Francois Quesnay. And of course, this guy, our guy, Adam Smith, was very important in his ideas of selfishness and also the invisible hand. This is an interesting poem. Took this from Amartya Sen's book, Economics and Ethics, which is an interesting book, by the way. I should have put this in the syllabus as well. Adam Smith, listen what I charge you with. Didn't you say in the class one day that selfishness was bound to pay? Of all the doctrines, that was the pith, wasn't it, Smith? So this was a poem written in his time, actually, a critique of his ideas of selfishness. And Adam Smith argues that people, individuals, are selfish people. So they are concerned with their own, let's see. Nope, not here. Anyway, self-interest. Okay, these are things. And Adam Smith was a very important figure in the emergence of our science, economics. But his idea of economics, political economy, he calls it, is somewhat different from that of Xenophon's position. What am I saying is simply this. Adam Smith argues basically that human beings are self-interested beings. All they care about their self-interest as individual self-interest we are talking about. So we don't care much about the rest of the society in general. So we enter into economic interactions, demand and supply relations, basically. And these relations form what we call the market, and market exchanges is the way in which economic activities are conducted in a capitalist economy. Adam Smith also lived in the first phase of the Industrial Revolution of England. Industrial Revolution is an important transformation period of the English society at that time. It starts with the application of machines into first agriculture and then industry. So it's a kind of machine society, the beginning of the machine society. And this was also important in the capital accumulation process, right after the mercantilist period in the late 18th century and in the early 19th century. And this is important. So Adam Smith witnessed this industrial revolution in its earlier phases, basically, and he was very careful about emphasizing the importance of division of labor within the society and also within the economic units, such as the factory. British Industrial Revolution actually created the factory system. There are many. It is based upon the invention of the steam engine in general, and steam engine allowed to organize the factory system, many machines together, depending on a particular machine that provides energy to the whole of this factory, and many workers actually work within the factory. And this type of organization, or the division of labor within the factory, had become an important principle that also in also organizing the society in general. There was this guy, Foucault, maybe you may have heard of him. Michel Foucault, is it Michel? Yes, I guess. Or Michael, whatever. And he has some interesting books about this transformation. He's a French guy. He wrote mainly in French, but the idea is always the same. And for example, this factory system was important in the creation of the organization of the army, in modern terms, of course, the organization of the prison system, and also in the organization of the education system, starting with some crafting schools, and then the universal education, everyone is going to be educated, this idea, and they are all based upon the principle of organization of the society along the lines of a factory. This division of labor is very important. Division of labor increases productivity, which means greater product output, what is produced in the country. It will lead higher wages and also increased per capita income, higher levels of consumption, and therefore greater wealth of nation. Wealth means more or less national income for Adam Smith or for the classical writers in general. Again, increased capital accumulation. And this is a process which repeats itself in an expansionary way. So the result is the increasing riches of the society in general. So, and all was produced, according to Smith, on the basis of the principle of self-interest. And this self-interest, there is this thing, this is value, whatever, is the basic idea, basic force, basic driving force behind increased productivity and so forth. So according to Smith, if everyone behaves in accordance with self-interest, the result was good for the whole of the society. There will be greater increases in the riches of the society, greater wealth, and also greater stability within the society or order. This is a very interesting point. And this order is an idea associated with the views of Thomas Hobbes, actually. Who's Thomas Hobbes? Thomas Hobbes was a very interesting 17th century figure. Again, let me find it if I can't see. And his most famous book is Leviathan. And Thomas Hobbes. Stop the share and share another one. Where are you? Again, Wikipedia, this guy, Thomas Hobbes. Why is this guy important? He's important. I said most important book of his is Leviathan, this book. And this is the cover page of Leviathan, basically. And in that, he's concerned with the emergence of social order. And he starts, like Adam Smith, of course, before Adam Smith, much before Adam Smith, it starts with the idea of selfishness of individuals. People are selfish. Basically, he lived between the 16th century and 17th century, 1588 and 1679. He had a long life and he was very productive, actually. When he was 90s, for example, in his 90s, he started translations of Homer's book, Iliad and Odyssey. So he was a very interesting guy. He was also engaged into political struggles within the English society. And he lived during the British or English Civil War, 1642 to 1651. He sided with the Republicans, so to speak, first, and then he alienated from them. He became part of the Royalist movement, but unfortunately he had to depart from them also because his ideas were very interesting. He argues, for example, not for the existence of a king, but a governing body, which could be a form of, I don't know, a kind of parliamentary organization or a kind of aristocratic organization or even a kind of oligarchy. But the point is that he argues that since human beings are self-interested people, they want to use any means at their disposal to achieve their own individual ends, but the result of this is the constant struggle, even chaos, social chaos, as a result of this constant struggle among individuals within the society, and there should be no order, a stable order within this society. This is a state in which everyone is at war with everyone else. That's his idea, because he is known with his adage, homo homini lupus, man is wolf to man. They, by their nature, they engage into constant struggles, even they create violence, basically. There's only one way of ending this violence, which is the creation of the state or a governing body, which will use force, sheer force, to suppress these instabilities through force, of course, and the result will be the emergence of a stable order. So state is a necessary evil. That's why I call this Leviathan. Leviathan was the sea monster in the Jewish ideas, mythology, actually. So evil is bad because it uses force against human beings, basically. But it is also necessary because there's only one way of preventing the society from falling into constant war and struggle. So for this reason, state is important, and this is called social contract. He argues that, in the beginning, human beings were living in a state of nature, as he calls it. They were able to do whatever they can do, but the result was anarchy and chaos and so forth. So they come together and devise a contract, a social contract, and this social contract created the state. This is a story, not necessarily a historical one. This is a fictional story, but the idea is clear enough. State is necessary for a society in which everyone is acting in a self-interested way. It is an evil, but also necessary. After this is, by the way, the beginning of the ideology that is known as liberalism. Hobbes is hardly a liberal because he actually defended the importance of the state. But still along his lines, John Locke, for example, and later liberal writers embraced the same idea of social contract, but they tried to base their ideas of social contract on the basis of mutual understanding and the ability to enter into dialogue of human beings in general. So we are endowed with reason, so we can understand each other. We can also talk. Through constant talking and understanding, we can create a stable order in which everyone is free. Some people say that the United States is based upon some Lockean ideas. United States Constitution is based upon the ideas, views of John Locke's, basically. I think to some extent it's true. But neither Hobbes nor Locke give any convincing reason about why a stable order can be established by itself. I mean, it's John Locke basically who defended such a position, but he cannot explain why this should be the case. And at that point, of course, Adam Smith comes in. He argues that it is the existence of economic interactions market exchanges among individuals that guarantees a stable social order without any interventions on the part of the state or any kind of government. This is a revolutionary idea. It started in the late 18th century. And for this reason alone, the famous idea of the invisible hand, we actually have to admire Adam Smith. And this is the beginning of economic science in general in terms of political economy. Okay. This is a history of the Western philosophy, emergence of economics, etc., etc. And also we should have mentioned also the emergence of the Enlightenment thought, but it's another issue that we may have to deal with later. But for now, we can say that economics starts with the Greek philosophy, invented by Xenophon, right? Xenophon was a military commander, and his ideas were quite different from those of Adam Smith. According to Smith, Hobbes, Locke, and so forth, and for the most part, for economists today, individuals are self-interested. And also, I forgot to mention one of the most important figures in the establishment of economics as we know it today. This guy, Jeremy Bentham. This is a particular picture of, it may be disturbing a little, but this guy, Jeremy Bentham, is seen in his, what is called auto-icon. He was born in 1748 and died in 1832, so the late 18th, early 19th century. He's famous with his idea of utilitarianism. What is utilitarianism? It is the logic of cost and benefit, basically, right? Last time I mentioned that. He argues basically that this nature has placed man under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. On the one hand, the standards of right and wrong, on the other, chain of cause and effect are fastened to their throne. So this idea of pain and pleasure gives the definition of happiness. Happiness is the difference between pain and pleasure, right? This is the happiness for the individual. Individuals are self-interested. They care about their own utility, their own overall pleasure, of course. And this philosophy is known as utilitarianism. Utility is important, not only for the individual, but also for the whole of the society. If you want to understand the happiness or well-being or welfare of the society, what we have to do is to add up individual pleasures, net pleasure we are talking about, right? Pleasure minus pain as the net utility. This is called by himself as the philosophic calculus of the happiness, basically, by happiness, right? So this idea is still with us today, not in terms of pain and pleasure, but in terms of cost and benefit, right? We are concerned with our own self-interest. We try to achieve as much benefit as we can and try to avoid costs, usually in terms of opportunity cost, but doesn't matter, every kind of cost. So this is very interesting, and he's still with us, and he was a very interesting man, as I said, an eccentric man, I would say. And after he died, his will actually was about placing his body into this auto icon, this thing. This is his body, actually. This was his real head. It was missed sometimes. A new one was made from the wax, basically, and it is still there. If you want to go to the City College of London, you can see it. I'm not sure you can see it, but this is the idea. Another most interesting work of his is this idea of this panopticon. This is the name of the book. Panopticon, sorry. Or the inspection house containing whatever. This is the name of the whole book. In the 18th centuries, people wanted to have these long names for this book, for their book. Adam Smith's book is also, it is the inquiry concerning the nature, into the causes, nature and the causes of the wealth of nation, but for short we use the wealth of nation. And this panopticon is about prison. And the modern prison, as Michel Foucault again says, at least, was born with Jeremy Bentham. This is the model for prison. In the center of here, for example, was the guards. These are the cells, basically, and these cells are under constant surveillance by the guards, basically. The American prison system is usually said to be based upon the Benthamite ideas of panopticon, and this idea is also the beginning of the surveillance of the society in general, right? Not only for the cell inmates, but for the members of the society in terms of the cameras and, internet and whatever. So this was an important transformation of the society. What I'm trying to say is that basically this 18th to 19th century is a very important period in which the whole of the society, the Western society first and the world itself later, is transformed in a radical way. Before capitalism, this is, we are talking about the rise of the emergence of industrial capitalism, starting with the Industrial Revolution. Of course, capitalism starts with, I don't know, there are some interesting debates about this as the emergence of capitalism, but we can say that since the 15th century, at least, we have humanity as capitalism. First, we had this mercantile capitalism, mercantilist period, sometimes it's called. And later, beginning with the Industrial Revolution, we have industrial capitalism. These days, of course, we sometimes talk about the end of the industrial capitalism instead of, we have different names for this. Informational capitalism, sometimes, second, third, fourth industrial revolution, sometimes, right? Sometimes industry 4.0, whatever, there are different names for this, emphasizing the importance of the digital, so to speak, revolution, etc. Anyway, so 18th century is the beginning of the transformation of not only the world itself, but also our thinking, our consciousness about this transformation. This is the beginning of the modern period, 18th century, and it was started actually in the 16th century with the rise of the Copernican revolution, basically. And, Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Huygens, and finally Newton actually signifies the emergence of modern science. Modern science is still with us, it is basically more or less what we understand by science. Newtonian ideas are still important in economics as well as in other social sciences, maybe more than they are important in physics, I should add. So this transformation of emergence of the modern science and the following or accompanying Enlightenment period, which argues that human beings are endowed with reason, they can find the right, correct answers on the basis of their thinking alone. They have to have no authority other than reason thinking itself. Kant, for example, an important German Enlightenment philosopher, defines Enlightenment as the position in which human beings obey only their own reason, and they emerge from their, I don't know, unscientific, let's say, positions, etc. So this also brought about some important social transformations or revolutions, such as the French Revolution in 1789. Even the British actually starts their own revolution earlier, starting in the 17th century, 1642, as you remember, or 1648, and it ended in 1688 with the Glorious Revolution and so forth. And these all transformations signifies the transformation of the world, transformation of our own consciousness about the world, what's going on. And we are, beginning from that period, we are modern people. And economics is a result, is a product of the modern times in general, starting with Adam Smith. And Adam Smith tried to apply Newtonian ideas into society and also into moral philosophy. Remember, he was a moral philosopher. So this is the date of the birth of economics as an independent discipline that has its own topic, its own methods of understanding what's going on in the society and so forth. But again, we know that the name economics was coined by Xenophon in the fourth century BCE. So why? This is the case. What is the difference between economics of Xenophon's and economics of Adam Smith? By the way, we can also say that there's an important distinction, there's an important difference between the economics of Adam Smith, which he calls political economy, by the way, and the economics of the 19th century, late 19th century, the economics invented by Marshall, Jevons, Menger, and Walras. The term economics actually was coined by Alfred Marshall in the late 19th century, 78, something like that. So there are some important differences between political economy and also neoclassical economics, as it is called. Neoclassical economics is still being taught at economics departments throughout the world. So what you understand by economics as the allocation of scarce resources among alternative uses is basically a neoclassical economic thinking. So we should not forget this important difference between political economy and the neoclassical economics. But still there's a uniting element between political economy and neoclassical economics, which is the idea of self-interested behavior. Self-interested behavior is the basic driving force behind the working of the markets, and these markets, functioning of the markets, will bring about a stable social order as well, in which everyone is happy. Happy in the sense that this the market society is the best society among all possible types of society. This is called sometimes as Pareto efficient allocation, right? In the Pareto efficient allocation, everyone would be happy in the sense that no one's position can be made better without making others' position in terms of economics or utility or whatever worse, right? You cannot make any individual better without making any other or others worse. This is the best allocation of resources. So the emergence of this stable order also creates the best results for the society in terms of economic welfare of the individuals in the society as well. So the uniting element is the idea of self-interested behavior. As I said, it starts with the emergence of the liberal thinking with Thomas Hobbes, interestingly. Since the 18th century, 17th century, I'm sorry, we had this liberalism. Everything is about individual is concerned with his or her own utility, and if we leave them to their own devices, everything will be okay in terms of the stability of the society, in terms of economic welfare, in terms of an efficient allocation of resources, right? This is the idea of invisible hand. So there's a continuity of thought between the notion of social contract and the invisible hand. Invisible hand is a way of showing the working or functioning of the social contract. And the difference is that of Thomas Hobbes's vision, of course, from Thomas Hobbes' vision, the difference is that this happens by itself without any help on the part of the government, without any kind of intervention on the part of the government. So this is the difference. But what is the difference between Adam Smith and Xenophon is a little more complicated. There are some important uniting elements, such as the importance of the social welfare in general, social well-being, or the well-being of the community, or in terms of the conception of human being as social beings. In that sense, they are similar to each other, but the political economy of Adam Smith and his followers emphasizes the importance of individual self-interest, which was condemned actually by Xenophon and also Aristotle, also by the Greek society in general, and also by the medieval society in general. Until the rise of emergence of capitalism, this idea of self-interest was considered as wrong from an ethical perspective. This is very interesting, right? Okay, next week we are going to talk about these issues and to a great extent, in greater detail, I guess.